Well, welcome back, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about the concept of utility and utility maximization. Now, you may notice right here that all of a sudden we've jumped up to Module 15. How in the world did that happen? Well, this is something that before we used to teach a little bit later on in the course, and then last year there was not exactly a redesign, but sort of a recontextualization of the class, and the College Board now suggests teaching utility maximization earlier. So that's why we're jumping ahead to Module 15 in this and putting this with the other basic concepts, and then we'll go back to the original, stay kind of on track with kind of how the book typically would present things. So that's why we're jumping ahead to Module 15. And I think it's kind of interesting that they wanted to move this up a little bit earlier. But what we're going to be doing here is talking about a concept. It's not even so much the concept that becomes important. There's a skill we're going to learn here, because we're going to start doing this marginal analysis that we talked about in the very first section, and doing this cost versus benefit analysis. And the skill set that you'll hopefully learn from this in regard to utility, you're going to find as we go through the course, you will repeat over and over and over again. We will use this same skill, this same process, to come to conclusions numerous times. The context is going to change as to exactly what we're trying to do with this process. And I realize I'm being kind of vague here and it won't make sense until you see it. But like I said, the skill itself is going to be crucial. So as we start doing these sort of calculations here in a little bit, pay attention to that, because this is a skill and a process that you're going to continue to build upon. Like I said, the terminology will change, the situation will change, but the process, the skill that you're learning here won't. It's pretty much the same thing. And if you can do what we're going to be doing by the end of this section, you can do at least half or more of what you're going to have to do in here with this marginal analysis stuff we're about to do. Okay, so let's first define some terminology and talk a little bit about this concept of utility and how we can measure it. So we've already talked about how the study of economics is the study of how we, allocate scarce resources amongst a limited wants, and that we're constantly weighing the cost versus the benefit, keeping in mind that cost does not mean price. We're in that marginal analysis where we are looking at this decision of, how should I keep doing this? What is the cost of continuing to do this activity? What is the concept of a cost of continuing to consume a product versus the benefit that it's going to give me? Utility is how we frame that benefit. In economics, when we talk about the utility of something, that means the benefit, the satisfaction. Utility is a measure of personal satisfaction. It is a measure of benefit that you will get. Sometimes economists actually measure utility in a unit called utils, which is an imaginary kind of thing. So that's just a unit for utility. Because it can't be measured, in inches or pounds or something like that. Obviously, utility is a very arbitrary idea. So, later we will get into some units where we'll see utility measured by a little bit more specific things. But, sorry, phone's ringing. Anyway, so utils is just kind of a general term. So that is like the extra satisfaction that I'm going to get when I eat another hamburger, or like this guy in the picture here is doing, or the extra satisfaction that I'm going to get if I buy a new shirt, or if I go on a vacation, or if I work an extra day. That additional satisfaction, additional benefit that I'm going to get is measured as utility, or as utils. Now, the two graphs that you're seeing here, one of them, the top one, this is called a utility function. So this is showing how the utility increases as you consume more of a product. But you'll also notice it does not increase forever. So notice that in this case, we're talking about food. So the more units of the food this person consumes, their utility increases until a point. And you can probably guess that as it starts to level off, and then eventually this would come down. And we have a name for that. We'll get to that in a moment. But this all makes sense to you. Think about it this way. If you have a bag of your favorite candy, you eat the first piece. That one's really satisfying. You really, really enjoy that one. The next one, maybe not quite as satisfying as the first, but you're still enjoying it. But if you think about, if you keep on eating and eating and eating that big bag of candy, eventually you're not going to get really any more benefit out of it. Eventually, you'll start to get sick of it, literally. You may even start to feel sick to your stomach. That's when that utility may actually become negative. That's when you may actually start to, lose utility every time you consume another unit. Now, that's something called marginal utility. I'll get that in just a moment. And it does decrease the more that we consume something. So utility, this is the utility function showing how the utility is measured, what is the total utility overall as they consume more and more of a particular product or a good or a service. Okay, so let's talk about this concept of marginal utility, because so much of what we do, we're dealing with the margin. We hear that word a lot. We use it so much. Total utility is the total amount of utility you would receive for consuming 5 hamburgers or 4 hamburgers or whatever. Marginal utility is the change in total utility when you consume one more unit. Remember that we're always thinking about one more unit, one more thing. So if I eat one more hamburger, my additional utility that I would get is my marginal utility. And that marginal utility can be found by it's the change in the total utility divided by the change in the quantity. Now, I didn't put that formula up here for you. It's pretty simple, and we'll use a very, very similar formula for similar concepts throughout the class. And oftentimes, when you're calculating that, the change in the quantity is going to be 1. So oftentimes, you're just looking at a change in the total utility, but be careful about that because we will see occasionally, in fact, there'll be an example later in this section where the change in the quantity will not be 1, but it is the change in the total utility over the change in the quantity. And again, that is the additional utility that I'm getting as I go from one unit to the next. So for example, this is still the same example that we had from the previous slide showing this person and as they consume this particular food. So if they're not consuming any, they don't have any utility. When they consume the first one, their total utility goes up to 15. At the second one, their total utility is 28. 3, it's 39, so forth and so on. That's what's graphed here on this utility function. Now, marginal utility, that is the change in the total utility. So that's what's being shown by these kind of lines here, these little pointy lines, jagged line, a chevron, whatever. As we go from 0 to 1, the total utility went from 0 to 15. Therefore, the marginal utility or the additional utility that is gained as they consume 1 unit is 15. When they go to the second unit, now we went from 15 to 28. So the marginal utility is 13 because that's the difference between 15 and 28. When we go to the third unit, now their total utility is 39. So the marginal utility of that third unit, third one consumed, is 11 because the difference between 28 and 39 is 11. And it just keeps on going down. And you notice here that marginal utility constantly decreases. Notice this right here is a marginal utility curve. This is the graphical representation of that marginal utility, and you notice that it goes down, continually goes down, because that gets less and less. Our marginal utility will be decreasing as we consume more. Let me get my pointer how I want it. We're being slow. There we go. Okay, so that brings us to a very, very important concept, the principle of diminishing marginal utility, or sometimes this is called the law of diminishing marginal utility. And that is simply that the additional satisfaction or the additional utility that we gain, that a consumer gets from consuming one more of a particular good, declines as we consume more, okay? In other words, marginal utility falls the more you have. And again, that should make perfect sense. First slice of pizza tastes great. Second one's pretty good, but maybe not as much as the second one. And as you eat more and more, the additional utility is going to decrease until eventually a point you're going to get to where you're not enjoying that pizza anymore at all. And you may actually start to feel sick after a while. Your utility has actually become negative probably at that point. So in other words, this explains why you eventually reach a limit. And it's not just food. We tend to use food all the time as examples. Economics always joke that it makes me hungry. Maybe that's not a joke. It's real. That's also the same for, other things you might consume. Say if you've got tons of money and you just buy all kind of cars. Well, the additional satisfaction you get from the next one and the next one and the next one goes down as you increasingly buy more. Or the number of vacations that you go on. Eventually, you get tired of being away from home and that sort of thing. All those inconveniences that come with it. So that utility eventually goes down. Oh, look at that. Okay. So that is the concept of utility. It's that additional satisfaction, and marginal utility, I should say, is that additional satisfaction, and that it does decrease. So what we want to do as consumers is to try to maximize our utility. We're always trying to maximize our utility. We want to get the most bang for our buck, if you will. We want to be able to, using the money that we have, our budget, how much we've got to spend, we want to consume the optimal amount. Consuming the optimal amount doesn't just mean let me buy everything I can buy with the money that I have, but it is more of a question of what's going to maximize my utility. What am I going to get the most benefit from? Think about it kind of like if you have a gift card for $50, you don't go into the store and just go, okay, what can I get for $50? You go in there and you think, what can I get for $50 that I'm going to enjoy the most, that I'm going to get the most use out of, that is the most valuable to me? You're trying to maximize your utility when we do that. So we have a budget, or what you might call a budget constraint. And what we're trying to find, we as consumers, even though we may not go through this real technical process that we're about to show in just a few minutes, we're trying to find that optimal consumption bundle. We are trying to find the consumption bundle. That means the combination of goods, this many pizzas and this many pairs of shoes or whatever. We can get some weird combinations going here. But we're trying to find that combination of goods that maximizes our utility, that gives us the most total utility. So I'm going to show you how to find this first by looking at the concept of total utility, which most of the time you won't actually do. You're going to use marginal utility. But I do this to prove a point. What this graph here is showing are the different consumption bundles for this particular person, assuming they've got X amount of money. They can consume either clams or potatoes. They could get, considering the price of them, they could get, all potatoes and no clams, or they could get all clams and no potatoes. Kind of reads similarly to a production possibilities curve. Or they could consume these different combinations of them. They could get 1 pound of clam and 8 potatoes for that amount of money that they have. The question becomes, though, how do they choose which one of these options to go with? How do they choose if they're going to do 1 and 8 or 3 and 4 or whatever? Well, that's where utility comes in. How much utility they're going to get from each of those things. So we're going to work through an example here the long way. Okay, so walk with me through this, and I'm going to just kind of use this to show a point. You will probably not do too many. I can't really think of too many instances in which you had to do too much like this. This is kind of the longer way of doing it. We're going to try to find this guy, Bill, here. We're going to find his optimal consumption bundle by figuring out which combination of these two goods, notebooks and CDs, which combination of those things can he maximize his total utility. We're going to use total utility here, and then a moment after we finish that, we'll check ourselves and back it all up by looking at marginal utility. So here's our information that we're going to use. Well, the information that we have, he's got $50. A notebook is $5 and a CD is $10. Okay, I'm going to switch over to another platform here and get my Chromebook so that we can see all of this. So if you will give me just a second, I'm going to pull that out. Let me pause for just a moment and be ready. I'll be right back. Okay, so I think got it ready to go now. So this is that same information. I just put a little note over here to remind us of this situation. Again, if I'm looking down, I'm looking at this. Total income is $50. Notebooks are $5 and CDs are $10. Now this one's a little tricky. Just keep in mind in that when we get to the marginal stuff that the quantity is not changing on notebooks by 1. It changes by 2, but that's neither here nor there right this second. So let's just go through here. Okay, so what we're going to do is go through all the different consumption bundles down here and figure out what the total utility would be for each set. Okay, so if he buys no notebooks, that means he's got all of his money, $50 to spend on CDs, which means that he could buy 5 of them because they are $10 each. I look up here and I can see that at 5 CDs, his total utility would be $300 because he's buying 5 CDs and no notebooks. Now, if he buys 2 notebooks, they're $5 each. That's $10 that he spent. That means he's only got $40 left, which means he can buy 4 CDs. Okay, at 2 notebooks, he gets 70 utils or 70 units of utility here. At 4 CDs, he gets 260. So 260 and 70, and forgive me if I double check my numbers here because I don't want to say the wrong numbers. 260 and 70, that would be 330. So his total utility, notice it went up. Okay, at 4 notebooks, that means he's spending $20 on notebooks, which means he can buy 3 CDs at $10 each. 3 CDs, that is 210, plus the 4 notebooks, that's 130. His total utility is 340. At 6, that means that he is now spending $30 on notebooks, meaning he can only get 2 CDs. 6 notebooks gives him 180 utils, whereas the 2 CDs is 150. So his total utility there is 330. If he buys 8 notebooks, he is now spending $40 on that. So he can only buy 1 of the CDs, okay? Which means at 1 CD, he gets 80 utils, and at the 8, it's 220. So that's 300. And it's kind of cut off down here on my end. Let me fix that, pull it up some so I can see it. Okay, at 10 notebooks, that means he can't get any CDs, and that would be 250. I hope you can kind of sort of see that. Okay, so where is his total utility maximized? Well, that would be right here. I'll switch my color because I can. Check that out. That would be right here at 4 notebooks and 3 CDs, because his total utility is maximized right there at 340. Okay, so that is his optimal consumption bundle. Now, again, that's kind of a long way of doing it. Now let's take a look at it using the concept of marginal utility. I'm going to show you how we could maybe figure that out a little bit faster. So let me move over and show you this. Let me get in the right place over here. Okay, very good. So here again is essentially the same information, still with our little note here just to remind us the total income is 50 and the notebook is $5, the CD is 10. Now, let's talk about the concept of marginal utility. So I'm going to go back over here. Let's go back to our notes before we did that, and let's talk about this concept of marginal utility. Okay, because marginal utility is how we can easily figure out what that optimal consumption bundle is, okay? Remember that marginal utility is that additional utility, the additional satisfaction that we get from purchasing 1 more unit of a good. So it becomes a question not so much of how much are we going to buy, but how much money should we spend on each good? How much of each one are we going to buy? Like in this case, you know, how many notebooks versus how many CDs and all of that. Well, that's going to come down to the marginal dollar, how to spend the next dollar, how to spend that next bit of money. You know, where should it go? Where are we going to get the most bang for our buck? And we find that with the concept of marginal utility per dollar. So that is the additional utility that you get for the next dollar that you spend, the additional utility you get for the 1 more dollar amount on a good or on a service. And we find marginal utility per dollar as the marginal utility. This is it right here. Marginal utility per dollar spent on a good is the marginal utility of 1 more unit of the good over the price of the unit of that good, or marginal utility of the good over the price of the good. So how much additional utility we're going to get as we go to that next unit divided by the price of that unit, okay? Now our optimal consumption rule or utility maximizing rule is this. That we're going to, because remember, ultimately what we're trying to do is maximize our utility. We want to get the most total utility. We found that just a moment ago by going through and calculating total utility. It's a little bit tedious. That's a little bit easier if we use the concept of marginal utility. And we find that place where we maximize our utility when we have a budget constraint, when the marginal utility per dollar spent on the last good or the last of each of those goods purchased is the same, when it lines up. When the marginal utility per dollar of good A is the same or as close as it can get to marginal utility per dollar of good B, that's where you're maximizing your utility. That's where you're at the optimal consumption bundle. But really, it's easier, and I really feel it's easier to go through. There's a better way to not calculate it, but to sort of find that spot, rather than going through all the marginal utility per dollars and finding where it's the same, because that can still be a little bit tricky sometimes. I'm going to show you how the easier way, the better way to do this. Although it's still what you're doing, it's just a little bit different way of finding it. So I'm going to switch back over to where I was because I can write on this. Okay, so let's go back over to our example here. There it is. Okay, so same example we had before, basically, but now we're going to do it with marginal utility per dollar. Remembering again that marginal utility, oops, I don't know what pen. So let's remind ourselves that marginal utility can be found, I don't like that. There we go. Marginal utility is the change in utility, remember delta, the little triangle there, that means change, over the change in the quantity. Oftentimes the change in quantity is going to be 1, but notice this is one of few examples, it's a tricky one, where the quantity for the notebooks changes by 2. So just be aware of that. And then we're going to look for marginal utility per dollar, and that is found by the marginal utility over the price. Okay, so first thing, I've got a little column here for my marginal utility per dollar, but first I need to find marginal utility. So I'm just going to make myself another little column here for marginal utility, like that, okay? Now, I went from 0 to 70, okay? That's a change of 70 in my utility, but notice that my quantity changed by 2. So that is a marginal utility, actually, of 35. Oops, I should put it over here, I'm sorry. Then we went from 70 to 130, okay? That is a change of 60 divided by 2 is 30. Then over here, 130 to 80, that's a change of 50 divided by 2, which is 25. Then we had a change of 40 divided by 2, which is 20. And then we had a change of 30 divided by the change in quantity 2, so that's 15. So that's my marginal utility at each of those points. Now over here, it's easier. I don't have to divide anything because the quantity, you notice, changes by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here we went from 0 to 80, so that's a marginal utility of 80. Then we went from 80 to 150, so that's also, no, that's not that. I get nervous. 70. Sorry. Okay, then 50 to 210, that's 60. And then 210 to 260 is 50. And then 40. Okay, so I found my marginal utility. Now marginal utility per dollar. So that means I'm going to take my marginal utility that I just figured out, and I'm going to divide by the price of each one. Remember that the notebooks over here, these notebooks are $5. So 35 divided by $5 there is 7. 30 divided by 5 is 6, and then 5, and then 4, and then 3. Over here, dividing by 10. So pretty simple. So that goes 8, and 7, and 6, and 5, and 4. Okay, so we figured all that. We got all our marginal utility per dollar. Again, this skill we're doing right here, this marginal analysis, you're going to use this all the time. You're going to use this with multiple things. So make sure you learn this. And I just have to say, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I love doing this. This is so satisfying to me. When you practice this a couple times and you get the hang of it, you're going to love doing it because it's just fun to do. And like I said, it's just satisfying when you find the right answer. Okay, so what we want to find is the place where we're at that optimal consumption bundle. So where are they going to get the most bang for their buck? Now remember, our budget right here is $50. He's got $50 to spend. So how is he best going to, I'm going to switch colors here so we can see. Okay, essentially what's going to happen is you're going to want to spend, first you're going to buy the thing where you're going to get the most marginal utility per dollar. That's what you're going to buy first. Where are you going to get the most bang for your buck? Well, that's going to be right here in this first CD, because 8 is the highest marginal utility per dollar. So we buy that first CD. That means we've spent $10. Okay. Then our next one, we're going to go, okay, notice that 2 of them have 7. So I might be going, well, how do we know which one of those 7s we're going to buy? Well, it's going to be the one that costs less. Okay. The one that costs less is the one you would go for. So that means we're going to come over here and we're going to buy these 2 notebooks. Now remember, there's 2 of them. So it's not $5 that I'm spending, it's 10. So I just spent 10 over here with my CDs. And now I'm going to spend 10 more over here with these 2 notebooks. So I've now spent $20, okay? $20. So now I'm going to come back over here and get this next CD. Now I've spent $30, all right? Now I'm going to go to the 6. I got 2 6s here. I'm going to go for this one because it's the one over here with notebooks because that costs a smaller amount of money per. So I had $10, $20, $30. Here's $40. I'm going to come over here and spend my $50. Okay, now I'm out of money. So that is my maximum, where my utility is maximized. That's my optimal consumption bundle, and that is at 4 notebooks and 3 CDs. And if you notice, that's the same answer we came up with before. So that's the easier way to do it, is finding the marginal utility per dollar, and then you go down. That's called marginal analysis. We go through that process of figuring out which one we're going to buy. So now let me see. What do we have to do back over here? Okay, practice, yes. So I'm going to switch back to where I was. What I'd like for you to do now is I want you to try pausing the video and go through and see if you can't answer this next question. Now you're going to do the same thing. We got snacks and drinks. You're going to try to determine the marginal utility and the marginal utility per dollar of the fourth drink. And really, you're going to end up doing it for all of them, because what you're going to end up doing is finding that optimal consumption bundle to maximize your total utility. You've got $20 to spend. Remember, you need to find marginal utility, then marginal utility per dollar, and then go through that process I just showed you to figure out where you're going to spend that money, that whole $20. So pause the video for a second, work that out, and then let it go again, and we'll see if you got the right answer. All right, so let's take a look at this and see what you got. So first, let's find marginal utility for each of these different parents. We're going to have to eventually do that anyway. So I'm going to fix that, and then I'm going to make myself a little column. Oops, fix that. There we go. Okay, I'm going to make myself a little column for marginal utility. Marginal utility. So additional utility. All of these are pretty easy because the quantity changes by 1 each time. So I can assume that at none, a quantity of 0, I had 0 utility. So that means we changed in 15. Marginal utility then 15 to 25 is 10. 25 to 31 is 6. 31 to 34 is 3. And 34 to 36 is 2. So there's our marginal utility. On this side, we go 12. 8, and that'd be 9, and then 8, 7, 4, 5, 6. That'd be a change of 5, and then 3, and then 2. Okay, notice I'm just looking at the difference as the total utility changes. The change in the total utility divided by the change in the quantity, which was 1. Okay, so the marginal, and then I want to find marginal utility per dollar. So now I'm going to just say, I'm just going to say per dollar. Okay, so I'm going to divide that by the price. Okay, so the price of the snacks are $4. So this one did give me some decimals, which is a little bit weird. 3.75. 10 divided by the $4 is 2.5. 6 divided by the $4 is 1.5. Sorry for my handwriting there. 3 divided by the $4 is 0.75, and the 2 would be 0.5. Okay, so that's my marginal utility per dollar for each snack that I might purchase. Now over here, the drinks are $2. So my marginal utility is 12 divided by the $2, that's 6. Then I've got by 9, that would be 4.5. At 8, it would be 4. Then 3.5. Then 3, 2.5. 3, I believe that's 1.5. And then, oops, that's not a 1. 1.5, and then 1. Okay, so now I'm going to go through that same process that we did a moment ago to figure out how many snacks and how many drinks I'm going to get in order to satisfy my budget constraint of $20. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to go for this first. Let me get a different color so you can see it better. Okay, first, I'm going to go for this first drink because the marginal utility per dollar is 6. That's the highest that it shows up. That's the highest that it is. I'm going to get the most bang for my buck right there. So I'm going to get this one. Okay, that's $2 that I've spent. Well, the next biggest number is 4.5. Now I've spent $4. My next biggest number is 4. So now I'm at $6. Okay, now I'm going to come over here to 3.75 and get this snack. Because that's the next highest utility. That's the next biggest bang for my buck. So I'm at 246, and then that would be 10. Then I'm going to come back over here because this is 3.5. So now I'm at 12. Then I'm going to get this one because that's bigger than the 2.5 over there. So now I'm at $14. Okay. Then I'm going to go, I got 2.5. So I'm going to go for the one that costs less first. So let's see, where was I? I was at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 14. This would be 15, 16. And then I'm going to come over here and spend my $20. And so my answer there, the total that I would buy would be 6 drinks and the 2 snacks. Forgot what letter I was on. There we go. So that's the answer to that one. So hopefully you got 6 drinks and 2 snacks. If you didn't, figure out what you did wrong, and let's try to correct it on this next and last example. So one more example to work through. Again, this class, you just got to do the work. You have to get in the weeds and do the work. So go ahead and try once again, pause the video, go through and figure out this one. We got donuts and coffee. You got the total utility for each one. Assume that the donuts are $2 and the coffee is $1. How many should you buy if you've got $10 to spend total? Pause the video, take a look at that, and then hit play to see how you did. All right, let's take a look at how we did here. So let me pull mine up. Here we go. All right, now. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out my marginal utility for each one. So I'm going to make myself a little column over here for marginal utility. That would be 10. And then as we go from 10 to 20, that's 10. Then we have 8, 6, 4, and 2. Over here, be 6, then 5, then 4, and then 4 again, and 3, and 1. Okay. Just making sure I'm right. Never hurts to double check. Okay, good. All right, now I want to find marginal utility per dollar. Remembering that my donut is $2, so I'm going to divide each of the marginal utilities by the price, $2. So that's going to be 5, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Over here, my coffee is only $1, so I just 6, 5, 4, 4, 3, and 1. All right. So if I've got $10 to spend, what's my combination going to be? Well, first, change my pen color. I'm going to get this first coffee because it has the highest marginal utility per dollar. So I've spent $1 right there. Now I've got multiple ones that have 5. I'm going to start with the one that costs less, which is the coffee. All right. So that's $2. Now I'm going to come over here. $3, $4, $5, $6. All right. Then I got a couple of 4s. But I'm going to come over here to the least expensive one. So that's, again, $1, $2, $3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7. And there's 8, 9, and 10. So if I've got $10 to spend, I'm going to buy 4 coffee and 3 donuts. Okay, so that would be 4 coffee, 3 donuts. Okay, if I've got $13, which means I've got another 3, I can just continue that process on down. So I was right there. The next place I would want to go would be, let me switch colors. I'd go right here. So that's $11 I'm at. Then I'd come over here, 12 and 13. So then I would be at 5 coffees and 4 donuts. Okay. All right. So that is how you calculate margin utility per dollar, how we find those optimal consumption bundles. And I can't stress enough how much you're going to use that skill when it comes to profit and cost, and we just do it all the time. So this marginal analysis, again, the terminology changes from it being marginal benefit to marginal revenue versus marginal cost and that sort of thing. But that skill is invaluable. If you can do that right there that we just learned, you can do about half of what you got to do in this class. So I hope that was helpful to you. You're going to get some more practice later on your own, and feel free to hit me up with questions and get a lot of practice doing that because, like I said, it's a skill you're going to need.